Here's why Sony needs to make a PS Vita 2. Now that the PS5 is about a year and a half old, and it seems like Sony is finally giving up on making sure every game comes to PS4 as well as the newest console, I'm looking to the future and there are some great games on the horizon. Like God of War Ragnarok, The Last of Us remake, this rumored Last of Us multiplayer game, a bunch of stuff that I am really excited for. But I can't help but thinking every time I hear about a new game in the back of my head that Sony is just leaving money on the table by completely abandoning the handheld market. The biggest reason for that is this, which is the Steam Deck. I'm sure you've heard about it at this point, but it is basically a handheld PC made by Valve. It's actually using similar architecture to the PlayStation 5, but just shrunk down into a much smaller form, and because it is a portable console, you have to make some concessions on how well it runs games to get the battery life to be more than 45 minutes. But the coolest thing about it is that it runs nearly every PlayStation PC port almost flawlessly, the only exception being Horizon Zero Dawn, and that really has nothing to do with the Steam Deck, but more with the port itself just being not that great. I'm being honest, guys, the Horizon Zero Dawn port is not good. They fixed it up quite a bit, but it's still not quite there. Looking at stuff like God of War, Days Gone, and Death Stranding's director's cut though, that is a completely different story. All of those games run at 800p, which is the console's native resolution, and also their original PS4 setting. Which, side note, I think that's something really cool that Sony does every time they port one of these games over to the PC. So instead of the medium settings, you have original. So if you set everything to original, it's basically looking and running as well as it does on the PlayStation 4 Pro, which is great because those are the settings that the game is most optimized for. We've seen Xbox kind of copying them with Forza Horizon 5. When they ported that over, they let Digital Foundry see what settings the Series X was running the game at, but I think what Sony does is a lot better because you can just have that peace of mind by setting the global setting to original and you're good to go. But the one port I want to focus on the most is God of War, because that's a series that I have had a ton of experience with on handhelds. There were, of course, the two PSP games, which really faithfully transferred over the God of War look and feel to that console. You could play God of War 1 and 2 on the PS Vita, and that is basically where I played all of those games. And they worked incredibly well as handheld games. But now, having the full-on 2018 God of War game, this just feels perfect on a handheld. The camera's close behind Kratos' shoulder. It was originally designed to run at 30 frames per second, so capping it at that with the original settings looks and feels incredible. You can even lower some of the settings just a little bit and bump it up to 40 FPS at 40 Hertz, which is something that a lot of people only really became aware of because of Sony when they patched in the 40 FPS mode into Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. It's just top to bottom a really incredible experience, and I'm not gonna lie to you guys, after playing this game on a handheld, I don't think if I picked up my PS Vita right now, I could go back and play those older God of War games. They were really good for their time, but having the full-on console game on this device is just a total game changer. And Valve is selling this thing for $400 for the 64GB model. Now, you do definitely have to get a micro SD card for that version, just because with modern game sizes, 64GB is not enough, but games run really well off of a micro SD card, and if you keep your eye out for sales, they're not that hard to get. Of course, Valve is taking a huge loss on this hardware to get it out there into the public because they know they can make all of that money back on the back end by people just buying games through Steam, but the same thing could be said for Sony if they made a PSP 3 or PS Vita 2, whatever you want to call it. They sell that thing at a loss at around $250, $300, a whole $100 less than the cheapest PS5, and then they make that money back by selling games on the PlayStation Store, and they win either way because if they're first party games, they make 100% of the profit, but if it's a third party game that they didn't even make, they get 30% of that game's sale, which helps them recoup the cost of the loss they're taking on each console. The exact same situation as you have with the PS5 right now. They're just about breaking even on those consoles, maybe making a little bit of a profit, but where they're really making their money back is in game sales. There's a ton of stuff that went wrong with the Vita, you probably know already, but the two biggest issues I think were that Sony abandoned it right out of the gate. Like when it came out, it it didn't sell gangbusters numbers. So they just basically said, all right, well, we're not supporting that thing. And second of all, how they made it use proprietary memory cards and then charged an arm and a leg for them. Like, it was just completely out of whack how much they charged for those memory cards. And if you wanted to store games on your PlayStation Vita, you needed those memory cards. So knowing that, I feel like in the future, Sony's got to have a little bit more support for any handheld they make, but also just make it support micro SD. You know, you want to keep the cost of the console down, give it 64 gigabytes of internal storage, and then let it support micro SD cards. People have those laying around from their Nintendo Switches, and like I mentioned already, they go on sale all the time. Another thing that I think really hurt the Vita is that Sony closed a lot of the studios that could have been making Vita games. Evolution is their racing studio. They made the MotorStorm games and then Drive Club. Sony closed them after they made Drive Club, but man, MotorStorm was severely underrated, underplayed. It is awesome. Anyone who played MotorStorm, specifically Pacific Rift, knows how good that franchise was, or even the PSP MotorStorm Arctic Edge. That game was amazing. It was so good, and then Sony shut that studio down. Zipper Interactive, they're the people who made the SOCOM games. They made MAG, which wasn't that great. Their last game was Unit 13, which was a third-person mission-based shooter for the Vita. It was honestly really good. I enjoyed that game a ton. The game that really hurt them the most, though, was SOCOM 4, which it's completely Sony's fault that game didn't catch on. That game was multiplayer-centric. It was made to be a multiplayer game for the PS3. It came out basically during the huge PSN shutdown that happened on the PS3 because it got hacked, and then they get punished again and closed because their game Unit 13 doesn't sell gangbusters on the console Sony abandoned. But now we're in the age of acquisition, and since then Sony's not only opened up new studios, they have also bought new ones. So there are plenty of studios who could work on a potential PS Vita 2 game. One of them, in my mind, a port of Days Gone would be incredible. We know that Ben Studio really came into their own making handheld games. Resistance Retribution was incredible, and they also made the best Vita title hands down, Uncharted Golden Abyss. That game is just so good, and I'd love to see them either make an original game, maybe even a new Uncharted prequel for the Vita 2. That would be awesome. Also, Guerrilla Games would be an incredible developer to see develop a handheld game once again. One of my favorite PSP games of all time, like period, was Killzone Liberation. I was ranked really high in that multiplayer. It was a ton of fun, and I loved the multiplayer in Killzone Mercenary. Now, I went back recently. That game doesn't run as well as I remember, but it was a really cool first-person shooter for the Vita. So I'd like to see Guerrilla take their knowledge from Horizon and maybe make a spin-off on the PlayStation Vita. And if Sony really wanted to knock it out of the park with a new handheld, they just have to look at what the Steam Deck is doing. You know, the utility of the Steam Deck is that I can put Elden Ring on this device and it runs really well at high settings, 30 frames per second, 800p. Sometimes it drops in the open world, but that happens on every console except the PS5 running the PS4 version. But then if I want to switch over to my laptop or play on my TV on my PC that has a 3080 in it, it just works. It downloads my save right away, and it's the exact same game on handheld and PC. I would think Sony could figure that out with some of their bigger games, especially since this thing is literally a portable PS4, and they're still releasing a ton of games on PS4. Horizon Forbidden West, God of War Ragnarok, Gran Turismo 7, the list goes on and on. This could run into the same issue that they ran into with the PS3, where when the Vita came out, it had parity with a lot of PS3 games. You would get the cross-buy functionality where if you bought it once, you got it on both devices. And then when the PS4 came out, that sort of wound down except for indie games. But if they could get a more advanced version of the RDNA 2 chip inside the Steam Deck, they could probably make it have somewhat similar parity to the PS5, because the PS5's whole allure is that it runs games at 60 frames per second at higher resolutions. But if you had an 800p device with a better chip than what we've seen in the Steam Deck, that's basically the same chip that's in the PS5, just like downclocked, that could have games running at 800p, 30 frames per second, and it would be great for handheld play on the go. Like farming the open world in Elden Ring is something I love doing on the Steam Deck, but when I go fight a boss or do something big in the story like a bigger dungeon, I like switching over to the TV, and that just works. And that's perfect for the types of games Sony seems to be obsessed with making these days, like Horizon Forbidden West. It's a huge open world adventure that can take 70 or 100 hours to beat. That would be so much more fun if you could knock out the side quests, the crafting, all the busy work that comes along with an open world game on your PS Vita 2 while you're watching TV. And I really think they need to make a handheld that runs the games on the actual device. I know that Microsoft is working on a handheld that uses xCloud, and then you connect to the internet and you can play games over the cloud. A lot of people like doing that on the Steam Deck as well, but to me it's just not really what I want to do. There's latency, you get blocky textures, it doesn't always work, you need really good internet. Like, you're just relying on so much connectivity that you don't really need if the games can just run natively on the device. Like, I just see no hype coming from a handheld that plays games from the cloud. Like, no one's asking for a PlayStation Now handheld. Having classic support on this new handheld would be great, going all the way from PS1 all the way up to the PS3. That would be a dream come true. I would absolutely love to play Infamous and Infamous 2 on a Sony handheld. Knowing that you can just download the new PS3 emulator onto the Steam Deck and play Metal Gear Solid 4, but I can't do that on my PS5, that really sucks. And just to round this out, I was a freshman in college when the Vita came out, and I was so bummed when I saw all these websites like Kotaku specifically, just day in and day out seeing articles about how no one wants a powerful handheld and that the 3DS is the best we'll ever get. The Nintendo Switch was basically a successor to the Vita, whether anyone wants to admit it or not. It does a lot of the same things. Honestly, it does a lot less than the Vita, and people absolutely love it because it's a powerful console that you can connect to the TV and take on the go. The Steam Deck, since it released and Valve started getting more orders out there, has been consistently #1 on the top sellers of Steam since it basically came out, and that just shows how many people want a powerful handheld device like this. And if you could get Sony's best games on it directly from them, that would be incredible, because the best thing you get with that is day one releases, which I don't think we're going to see for a long time on the PC. Sony just wins if they come out with their own handheld and put the games out on PS5 and whatever the sequel to the Vita is on day one. But that's just my thoughts on it. As it stands, we have the Steam Deck filling the void, and it's totally capable of playing Sony's ports. I think it will stay capable for years to come, which is great. If you're into that stuff, please go check out my channel Deck Ready, and remember to subscribe and set your notifications to all if you haven't already. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.